What's up, guys? My name is Ilya, and today I'll be starting a new series called Whitepaper on the Go. This is for those of you who have full-time jobs, you have families, you have things to do, and you may not have the time to sit down and read the entire white paper for all of these coins out there. I mean, there's thousands of cryptocurrencies. So I am doing this as a favor. In turn, I am reading the white paper. I am summarizing what is on said white paper as I go and presenting it to you guys. This is going to be a non-biased review of mentioned white paper, and I felt like I will start off with Bitcoin, the ticker being BTC, for this presentation. All right, so this is a quick disclaimer. I'm not going to read this to you, but in an essence, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I am simply going to be summarizing the white paper. Feel free to pause this if you care. I wrote this up in like a minute. Okay, so with anything, there's always going to be a problem, a solution, and a way to solve that problem. So to begin with, we have a trusted party. Sounds good, but there's drawbacks. So a completely non-reversible transaction is not possible. There's no avoidance of mediation by financial institutions. In other words, this means that non-reversible transactions do not exist, really. There's always going to be some kind of third party or middleman involved. So for example, if a seller wants to sell you a headset, they have to trust a third party such as Amazon in order to facilitate this transaction. So hypothetically, if the buyer receives the headset, then they call their credit card company and say, well, I didn't receive the headset. The credit card company is going to trust the buyer unless it's not the first time they do this. So in turn, they will end up back billing Amazon. That will end up either asking the seller to resend the product, or they're just not going to receive the payments. So this obviously sucks for the sellers and great for the buyers. So that is a big problem. That means that fraud is unavoidable. And on top of that, you need to use extra resources to gather the information, which may lead to increased fees and delayed transactions. You also have to take into account the opportunity cost and the headache that this may cause. Certain aspects of this can be avoided using physical currency, but everything digital currently relies on a trusted mediator. So if you make a transaction through Craigslist, you meet somebody in person, you hand them over the product, they hand you physical fiat, you walk away, everything is good. But online, unfortunately, there's always going to be that middleman. And so the problem that Bitcoin is trying to solve is having these transactions done online, but without needing a third party involved. So what do we have? We have a peer-to-peer system using a cryptographic proof instead of trust. So from one person to the other using encryption instead of using a third party as a middleman. You can do this by setting up an escrow. And so an escrow, for those of you who don't know, is basically a section where you put in the product. So let's say the seller sends their headset into the escrow, and they have certain factors that have to be met prior to that headset being released to the buyer. We already have that set up in this world. However, the irreversible part is not. So that's what Bitcoin is trying to solve. They're trying to make it irreversible with an escrow. And then we have the issue of double spending. So double spending in turn is like, let's say Alice sends $5 to Bob, but she only has, well, let's say Alice only has $5 to spare, right, in her bank account. She sends $5 to Bob, but she also sends $5 to Jackie because, Jackie gave her money before. But she only has $5, so she can't possibly send $5 to two people. So a way to solve this is by involving a timestamp server that puts these timestamps in chronological order. and these transactions are approved by others in the network. So every single individual or every single node, every single CPU in the network is going to be its own entity. Each one is going to have one vote, and they're all going to be honest unless some of them are going to be altered. Like, let's say a hacker decides to alter a ledger and say that they have $1 million instead of 200 in their account. Well, as long as the amount of honest nodes exceeds the amount of attacker nodes, the system will remain secure. This sounds great, especially with mass adoption. The more nodes that enter the system, the more secure the system. Now, you have to take into account that it is still possible to hack the system if the amount of attacker nodes exceeds the amount of honest nodes. Now, that will require enormous amount of computational power. No single entity may do it. However, you have to also bear in mind that financial wars do happen. And let's say if North Korea decides, for whatever reason, to start buying up all this computational power in order to ruin the economy or the future economy per se, if hypothetically, Bitcoin or any other proof of work cryptocurrency gets accepted in the future as a form of payments, then they could potentially cause havoc in the community, by destroying the economy. So once again, system remains secure as long as honest nodes control more computational power than attacker nodes. That will require lots of computational power if you want to overtake the honest nodes. So the methods, transactions. Okay, so previous owner signs the transactions of the hash plus the current owner's public key. The private key is used to sign and public key is used to verify. So if you look on top over here, a transaction consists of the public key, the hash, and the previous signature. And the private key is used to sign off the signature of the next transaction, and the public key is used to verify. Okay? So to prevent double spending, all transactions need to be publicly announced, and there needs to be a system in place to track the order. Okay, so how do you track the order? You have to incorporate a timestamp server. Each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain. Any disruption of a timestamp will alter all of the hashes that fall after. So if a hacker decides to alter the hash of one transaction or the block of one transaction, then it will alter any future blocks in that blockchain, in turn requiring more work to be done. And so now we come to the whole concept of proof of work. And this is just copy paste. The proof of work involves scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. As the number of 0 bits, the number of zeros increases, the amount of work required will also increase. As a block is changed, all future blocks need to be changed, as I explained before. Representation by proof of work, the longest valid chain represents majority decision. One CPU, remember, one CPU is one vote. So if the majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest, rejecting the altered chain by possible attackers. If two nodes broadcast different versions of blocks, then a branch will be formed and the chain continued on both blocks until a unanimous chain is formed. So in other words, if you have a hacker node or an attacker node, in other words, form a block, they will chain out or they'll branch out, and both of these branches will keep growing until one will surpass the other branch. And generally, the honest nodes will grow faster, and then it will reject the false or invalid chain. So that's how you keep an honest system going. Once again, it is still possible for the attacker nodes to grow faster if they have a lot more computational power, but is rare. If a government decides to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into this, they could possibly take over the system. So network, I decided to copy and paste this directly from the white paper because I thought it explained it well, but I'll just read it off. So new transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects new transactions into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. Nodes accept the block only if all transactions in it are valid and not already spent. Nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block in the chain, using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. No need to reach all nodes. If a block is not received by a node, it will be requested once it realizes a block has been missed. So now you have to look into the cost. So obviously, you have to include the CPU time and the electricity cost. So electricity cost because you're using all this power, and CPU time because you could be using the computer for something else. You also have to take into account the opportunity cost. So would your money have been better off elsewhere? So would you have invested more into buying the coin instead of mining or whatnot? Would you have been better off paying loans? You have to take that into account. However, the block reward and the transaction fees provide the incentive. So the block reward will keep having, and the block reward will end approximately in the year 2040, where 21 million bitcoins will have been mined. And that is the maximum supply of bitcoins ever available. A lot of them have been lost right now, and I will be going over the token metrics later in these slides. But after the year 2040, there will be no more block reward, and so at that point, the incentive will be only transaction fees. So for those wondering, why would anybody keep mining after? It's because they will still be receiving transaction fees. Okay? So if attacker is somehow able to accumulate enough CPU power to fraud the system, it may be more beneficial to obtain new coins through mining. A lot of people are saying, if they have enough power, why don't they just, obtain the coins legitimately? So that's something to think about. And now you're thinking, okay, well, where is all this information stored? It's stored on every single node, every single computer, every single memory. So transactions are stored in memory, but transactions that happened a while back are discarded with only the root being included. So a single block is generated approximately every 10 minutes, and the calculation goes as 80 bytes. If every block is 10 minutes, then there's 6 blocks per hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year. So you're looking at about 4.2 megabytes per year. Growth of transactions obviously aren't included because, as more transactions in the system, the more data you have to store. But if you think about it, there's going to be ample amounts of data that could be stored because, if you even buy a 2 gigabytes RAM, that will be good enough for you, to store the information. Now, you don't need lots of RAM in order to mine currently. Okay, that's the point I was trying to make. Doesn't use up that much memory. So the privacy. Transactions are public, but no information that will allow a specific transaction to be linked to an entity. Okay, so like I said, they're encrypted. There's no name involved. You don't have a name attached to it. They just have your address. Now, there are coins out there that try to even encrypt that, so go completely ghost. And there are downsides to that, and I won't be covering it in this slide. This is specifically for Bitcoin. So new key pairs generated for each transaction Some linking is unavoidable. If key owner is revealed, you can track other transactions incoming and outgoing. So unfortunately, because transactions are public, if you happen to unveil the owner of a single key pair, you could essentially track the rest of their transactions in their history. That's the downside. Calculations. So if you want to see the details, I'm not going to go over. It's not going to be, this white paper on the go is not going to get that technical. But the idea is that the receiver gives a public key and signs during transaction. That way, attacker doesn't have time to preload the chain. This in turn will actually prevent fraud because, for example, if you go get a cup of coffee and you don't really use Bitcoin for coffee, but let's say hypothetically the fees were low. If you were to buy something and the transaction would go through, but then you would just cancel the transaction quickly because you already have a chain that's been built up, and so you can fraud the system by altering the entire chain afterwards faster. Then that would be the downside. However, if you can't preload and the receiver gives you the public key and signs off while the transaction's happening, then that means that the chain is already behind. And so in order to catch up, it will require a lot more proof of work in order to fraud the system. The further behind in blocks, the harder it will be to catch up with the honest nodes. So the roadmap, the white paper did not include a roadmap, but I felt like because it was such a short white paper, I might as well include the history of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was created by a group of developers or possibly one entity under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody really knows who they are. Maybe somebody does, but we, the general public, do not. And we don't know if they're alive or he's alive or she's alive or it's whatever it may be. We don't know if they're alive or they're still there, but we do know if they went public that they will be one of the richest people in the world. So the first block was mined on January 3rd, 2009. The first transaction was done between Satoshi Nakamoto and Hal Finney back in January 12, 2009. And you guys can read this, but throughout the years, there's been some positives. So for example, in 2013, Bitcoin was ruled as a currency by a Texas judge. And then we had the whole situation with Silk Road. I will not get into it in this presentation. However, I might be making a video in the future about the whole Silk Road situation. However, if you are interested, you guys should watch Banking on Bitcoin. It does explain it in pretty good detail. Then finally, we have some big companies accepting Bitcoin, such as Overstock.com and Microsoft. And as more companies accept this, as more people start using this as actual currency, the more adoption that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will entail. So then we have some extra information that I gathered from the web. On August 18, 2008, the domain name bitcoin.org was registered. And January 3rd, 2009, the first Bitcoin was mined. The first block was mined, which rewarded 50 Bitcoins. And embedded in the text was on the brink of second bailout for banks. So Bitcoin basically came about because of the financial crisis back in 2008, where the banks were holding onto your money, and thus people did not have access to their own money. I mean, it's a pain in the ass. So why not give people, their own money? They will be the holders. They'll be their own banks. That is the whole idea behind Bitcoin. In the early days, Nakamoto is estimated to have mined approximately 1 million Bitcoins. Before disappearing from any involvement in Bitcoin, Nakamoto, in a sense, handed over the reins to developer Gavin, who then became the Bitcoin lead developer at the Bitcoin Foundation. So 1 million Bitcoins, estimated at today's price, it's like $8,000 something. So we're looking at a multi-billionaire, right? If he came out public. The team unknown, Satoshi Nakamoto. Coin metrics, this is really a coin, but as of March 25th, 2018, at the time I was making this presentation, the current price of a Bitcoin was, around $8.5 thousand. The max supply ever will be 21 million Bitcoins, and the current circulating supply is around 16.9 million. Now, some of these coins have yet to be mined. Some of these coins are lost for good, for example, from the Mt. Gox situation. And just in general, people, losing access to their wallets or forgetting where they put them, or just general loss. So we may never have 21 million Bitcoins in actual circulation. The current 24-hour volume trading is approximately $4.8 billion, and the market cap is 144 billion. And for those of you who don't know, in order to maintain the market cap, you do the circulating supply multiplied by the current price. And the resources, you can find the actual white paper over there, and coin market cap for the token metrics. And I'd like to thank you guys for spending time to listen to this presentation. If you felt like it helped you understand it a little bit better, feel free to share it with anyone who may benefit. And if you do want to see any future presentations, feel free to subscribe. I will be making a lot more of these for other coins that I'm actually very passionate about, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.